On Monday, May 25th, Minneapolis police officers respond to a call about a customer using a counterfeit $20 bill. Officers arrive and pull the suspect, 46-year-old George Floyd, from his car, placing him in handcuffs. Minutes later, officers lay Floyd down beside the rear tire of the police car. An officer, later identified as Derek Chauvin, places his knee on Floyd's neck. As Floyd tells officers he can't breathe, bystanders plead for his life.
Bro, please. He's stopping his breathing right there, bro.
I can't breathe.
Okay, he's talking. He's talking.
After approximately 3 minutes, Floyd becomes unresponsive. Officer Chauvin continues to keep his knee on Floyd's neck until paramedics arrive, approximately 5 minutes later. The incident is the latest in a series of racially charged confrontations in recent weeks, including the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the police shooting of Breonna Taylor, and a 911 call about a black bird watcher in Central Park.
So we're here tonight to talk about some of the many challenges that Black men face in this country that has forced us here against our will, and for all you historical buffs in 1619, but then allowed us to stay only to build this country, and then later argue 200 years later in 1816, the argument was, well, what should we do about slavery? And that argument led to a society of secured land in West Africa, which became the nation of Liberia. And in 1863, slavery, it officially ended in the United States. And by 1867, there were over 13,000 Americans of African descent who were sent to Liberia. But for the vast majority of Americans of African descent, they were not leaving a country they built in blood, sweat, and tears. And so in their minds, freedom really was the only option. When the Civil War ended in 1865, the U.S. amended the Constitution to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude. But it left in one loophole people convicted of crimes. The 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment from crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to jurisdiction. This country has incarcerated Black Americans at more than 5 times the rate of whites. The imprisonment rate for Black women is twice that of white women, and Black children represent 32% of children who are arrested. And we have argued for years that the incarceration of Blacks is nothing more than modern-day slavery. Well, 25 years now after the LA riots following the beating of Rodney King, our community is left to pick up the pieces on the brutal deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. Before we begin the discussion tonight, I just want to share 2 quotes from Malcolm X. The first, I believe that there will ultimately be a clash between the oppressed and those that do the oppressing. I believe there will be a clash between those who want freedom, justice, and equality for everyone and those who want to continue the systems of exploitation. And the second quote, whenever you hear a man saying he wants freedom, but in the next breath he is going to tell you what he won't do to get it or what he doesn't believe in doing to get it, he doesn't believe in freedom. A man who believes in freedom will do anything under the sun to acquire or preserve his freedom. There have been a number of riots in several U.S. cities, 22 states and 37 to be exact, have curfews. While I don't condone violence and all of the rioting that is taking place, I certainly can understand it. And what have I seen differently in these riots is the faces of the front line. That front line has not just been Black, but that front line has been white, Asian, and brown. And so for the next 20 minutes, I want to indulge all of you in a conversation between 2 great men, 2 brothers of mine, Rob Dixon and Clifford W. Knights II. I want to allow them some time just to introduce themselves. So you gentlemen, you have 60 to 90 seconds to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Join the meeting.
Hey, Rob, go ahead, man.
All right, thank you. Is my sound clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Rob.
Well, good evening, and thank everyone for taking time out of your lives with all that's going on in our country to be here for this interaction. I do not want to spend a lot of time on myself. My name is, as the screen says, Robert Dixon. I am not a lawyer. I am a law school graduate, teacher, coach, husband, father, son, brother, and hopefully the screen is displaying that I am a Black man. I do live in the United States of America, so that makes me an African male in the U.S. I have 2 sons and a host of brothers. I have several sisters, nieces, cousins, and family members that I am concerned about. And I am on this call to help advance solutions. We all are intelligent enough and have lived in this country long enough to know what the range and unique set of problems are that our country faces. And I think I want all of my energy to be focused on solutions. Currently, I'm a junior high school teacher and a high school coach. And I look forward to bringing some background of the students and educators to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Rob, great to have you on the call. Cliff?
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, Rob, I appreciate that, man. My name is Clifford W. Knights II. I am also a Black man. I have 4 sons. I have about another 20 sons that I've raised. Jason, Rob, Biko, and a whole slew of another team have built a program for young Black men in entrepreneurship. So I'm looking at this as an outlet and an opportunity to do something great and to change the inside out for long term, because nothing is going to happen overnight. So we have to be patient, but we have to know that we have to go inside for us to get the change, because on the outside, it will not happen.
Rob, Cliff, I do appreciate both of you, for serving in the seat tonight. I mean, this is day 1, night 1, so let's get it started. And those who are joining by web, please place any questions in the chat box. My colleague and good friend Stephen is serving as the moderator, so you should probably just see his name as moderator in the group chat if you want to send him a private message, or you can just put the question in the chat for us all to see. We do want to spend the last part of the call tonight answering questions from all of you. So I'll start this question. Rob and Cliff, you can leave your mics open during the discussion unless there's some loud clamoring in the back. Keep your mic on mute. But this first question is for both of you. Cliff, you're CEO of a major corporation in South Florida, and you have footprints in many other states in the Midwest and out West. And, Rob, you have done a phenomenal job. The number of youth that you have educated over the years, the number of scholarships that you've helped them to garner, to go to college, is just impeccable. But you probably both have seen a picture that has been going around the World Wide Web. And it's a young Black boy, maybe around the ages of 7 or 8. And on the sign that he's holding, it says, "Am I next?" And so the question we'll just start with you, Rob, and then Cliff, you can join in after, is what do you say to that young Black boy, maybe age 7 or age 8, who has recognized a world in which he had never imagined seeing before, and he has this sign that says, "Am I next?" What do you say to him?
Well, thank you for the question. I think you have to speak to him as my mother spoke to me in the early 80s, with reality. I think we do our young brothers and sisters disjustice or in-service if we make them believe that they're living in a world where that is not a possibility for them, unfortunately, if they do everything right. The conversation my mother had with me was about 14 or 15. I was about 14 or 15. I think I had just acquired my license and I started to drive. And she gave me the talk that all of us, many minorities and specifically African-American males, remember some mother or father or uncle figure in your life, a coach, a principal, having the talk with you about how to behave yourself in the presence of a police officer, or in the case that you have an unfortunate interaction with a police officer. So I think we have to tell that young brother and all of our youth that this is a possibility. Unfortunately, we live in a world where even if you are compliant, even if your license and registration are up to date, even if you are not carrying a weapon in the car, even if you did not commit a crime, even if you are innocently walking in your neighborhood or jogging in another's neighborhood, even if you are a parent, a teacher, a coach, there is the possibility that an interaction in the United States could end in your death. I think if we do not tell them that reality, if they're age appropriate and we're able to articulate that to them, we're allowing them to walk out the door with a set of rose-petaled glasses on in a bubble that when it does burst, we did not prepare them properly. And I'll end by saying this. In addition to educating our youth on how they should interact with the police, there needs to be a conversation about what their rights are legally also, and how to appropriately exercise those rights. And I'm not saying that we should allow ourselves ever to get abused or mistreated, but sometimes when we don't know the law and our youth react out of natural defensive instincts, it can unfortunately elevate situations. That is not justifying any officer taking the life of anyone. But we must tell them the reality and then teach them the ways to manage unfortunate situations. And I think schools and educators have a responsibility, in addition to teaching kids how to manage mass shootings in school environments. We need to be talking about how to educate minorities on how to understand and manage their policing interactions, although that still may not prevent them being harmed.
Robert, I'm glad you mentioned that, and we'll dive into the policing and the law even more tomorrow. So I'm glad that you brought that up tonight. Cliff, you were raised in the streets of Boston and then later transplant to South Florida, and I know that your experiences have been myriad. So answer the same question. How do you answer the question that the young boy, the son he's holding, who's scared out of his mind, who's living in a nightmare, and he wonders if he's next?
Hey, listen, I have a 9-year-old, so I know, and I tell them every day that they have to be, and I have an 18-year-old as well, by the way, and he's driving. So I have to be very careful of how I speak to him and how I let him know that he needs to go out there and be respectful to everyone. And it doesn't mean that you need to bow down to anybody, but you need to be respectful to everyone, because you don't know what that sound. We're a weapon just with our skin. So we don't know what that person is going through, what they went through yesterday or this morning, why they did what they did. Not justifying anything, but just saying that when you come off harsh and crazy, or you want to act crazy, because a lot of us, like myself, I come from the streets in Boston, and I could be a little irate sometimes. And you need to know that you need to calm down, speak appropriately, know how to carry yourself correctly, and know how to walk the talk, And that's what I teach my boys, because I have 4 of them, 4 black men. So yeah, I would tell that young man that we got some work to do, because like Rob said, no one's safe until we create that safety.
So, Rob, back to you. This question is really about the policing that we've seen here these last couple of years. You know, how has policing changed through your purview in America since, you know, the brutal beating of Rodney King some 25 years ago was pulled over by four police officers, repeatedly kicked and pummeled with batons and shot with a stun gun. How has it changed, or has it remained the same?
I have to answer that in both. I think policing at some levels that maybe we don't see has changed. Then on the reality end, or what we're starting to see in media due to the advent and the extensive use of social media, maybe policing has not changed. Maybe policing is what it always has been historically. Maybe our police are doing what they are trained to do. Maybe our police are doing what they're not trained to do. Maybe there is not enough training on de-escalation, on sensitivity, on understanding and community policing, and working with the people and getting to know people by name, or understanding the people that you're working with. So I think that there are some things about policing that have changed, but I think the vast majority of us regular non-police or non-law or authoritarian folks don't see a change. I would beg to differ that it has worsened, that we may have seen a sharper shift in our policing tactics, whereas, think about it, Rodney King was extremely heated situation for us because we grew up during that era, right? Mm-hmm. Like you just introduced the question, he was beat, but he was still left alive. Mm-hmm. We're watching minorities, specifically Africans in America, repeatedly, systematically, without any legal justification, losing their lives. Okay? And we all seen the updates today, right? Brother George's families ordered an autopsy, which contradicted the original autopsy, right? By the county done there. He died of asphyxiation at the scene, right? So
Rob, let me ask you this, because you kind of bring us to this next point, you know, and I'm glad you raised that point about Rodney King being left alive, and then the most recent case with George Floyd, not so much, right? So why haven't the other officers been arrested?
So again, I'm not a lawyer, and that is a question that only those that have that authority in Minneapolis can make that call. I can give you my opinion and just say that what I've seen from the first news outlets and a little bit of the reading that I've done, NPR, trying to bounce around a couple news stations to get a non-biased, consistent opinion, is they didn't feel as though they had enough evidence to charge everyone so far. And from a legal perspective, that doesn't make sense, right? But think about it as a prosecution. You want to make sure you can win your case. So you're trying to make sure, if I go this route, will I win? Those of us looking on the outside in, that's BS, okay? And the governor or the mayor, I'm not sure which one, someone correct me if I'm wrong, has now turned the entire investigation over to another brother that's a legal entity there in Minnesota, and taking it out of the hands of the original district attorney there. So even the governor is recognizing that the first cause of death was a little bit shaky, and there hasn't been a movement on the other officers. So he's putting it in the hands of somebody that he believes can bring a more unbiased legal preparation for it. But I can't answer that. You know, that has to be with the prosecutors there on why they don't feel as though those officers, regardless of what we saw on the video, should be in custody right now. And that's a problem.
Even the chief of police said that they should be in custody.
Yeah, so tomorrow when we really dive into the legal aspects, it'd be very interesting to kind of raise that point again. Cliff, keep your mic unmuted. I'm interested in knowing, there have been so many messaging about just police brutality, bad police brutality, right? Even in old movies, between the three of us, we grew up in the 80s and 90s when movies like Do the Right Thing and Boys in the Hood and Juice and New Jack City, all emphasize police brutality. If that message was shown then, Cliff, and we still see those messages even today play out in real life. Cliff, as an accomplished businessman, what type of message will be enough? Your whole industry is business, right? And so I'm just curious to know if we've seen this play out time and time again through your lens as a businessman. When will the messages be enough?
Well, I don't think the message on whether the cops understand what we're going through, why they shouldn't do what they're doing, that message, I don't see it being enough. I don't see them understanding what we're talking about, what we're going through. They're understanding their fear of us, and they're understanding that they're a gang. They're a gang, and they're doing whatever it takes for them and their gang to stay alive. Not for us. They're not looking to take care of us. So they come in there already ready. They come in our underserved communities, they come at our Black men, and they come at us ready for whatever. And they said that they will deal with the consequences because they're a gang and they stick up for each other. You've seen what they did. He's killing the dude, he's choking him to death, and they're standing there holding the crowd off. That's gang mentality. We all grew up in the underserved community. We know what that looks like, because if there was any inch of righteousness in any of them, they would have snatched that dude off. I don't think that they're gonna get it, but I think that we have hope. And the reason why we have hope is because we, as a generation, is building up our younger generation and putting them in a position to see that you have to put yourself in place to win. You can't put yourself in a place to say, hey, I'm gonna work at McDonald's. Nothing wrong with somebody working at McDonald's. But if you're a businessman, you're a politician, you're a college grad, you're a professor, you're doing stuff like that, then you can make a change. It's very difficult for you to make a change from the outside. You have to make a change from the inside. The way that we make a change from the inside is finances, because people don't understand anything about money. Finances is gonna get us, and voting is gonna get us. Yeah, sorry about that.
Just
Go ahead.
there you go. No, you're good. I just wanted you to turn your mic down a little bit. I can hear you good.
Oh, sorry. Martin Luther King got into the room because he had constituents. That's how he got into that room.
Cliff, let me pause you for a second. Turn your mic up a little bit more, Cliff, because I want to dive into that because, we have many conversations, Cliff, about being in the room, having a seat at the table, right? And talk about how African Americans can leverage themselves to have more seats at the table, right? And that's what you do. How have you been able to garner that in your life?
Putting myself in a position. Me and my brother, we started this company 20 years ago, right? And seeing and hearing what we needed to do to be successful, the ultimate success was being in that room, because that's where the contracts were, that's where the opportunities were, right? As young Black men in America, it was very difficult for anybody to respect us if we didn't have the blessings from the people in those rooms. So we had to get into those rooms, Chamber of Commerce rooms. We had to get with our city councilors. We had to get with the mayors of the city, the police chiefs, so on and so forth. Local government is where our change comes from. And those are the rooms that we were able to get into the position that we are today. The mayor of Broward County is a good friend of mine's because he was the city council for Lauderhill, the city of Lauderhill, where I started my business. So now he's the mayor of Broward County. I can go to him and put a platform in front of him, and he says yay or nay. Most times, I can get things done that I need to get done because I'm doing it the right way. But that's how you get into the room. And those rooms are not locked off. You can literally walk into your city commissioner's office with no problem.
Yeah, that's good. So Rob, Cliff kind of touched on something that I read earlier. President Obama tweeted probably about 2:00 this afternoon. Our forever president tweeted, eventually aspirations have to be translated into specific laws and institutional practices. But that only happens when we elect government officials who are responsive to our demands. Can you talk, Rob, about the importance of voting mayors and county execs that appoint most police chiefs and negotiate collective bargaining agreements with police unions? I think that there is a disconnect between our Black community and who we should be voting for. So can you talk about just those two seats?
Absolutely. What happens is when we learn civics very early on, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, the presidential race is the most highly and historically focused part of our civic education and civic training. Most of us, to be honest, leave high school and go on to whatever the next level is in our life with not a thorough understanding of our local government and civic process and duty and the rights that lie there. That's by design, okay? That's by design. That's not by happenstance. When we focus on being lazy for 4 years and voting once every 4 years, most of the power that Cliff talked about goes by on different cycles, annual cycles, every 2 year cycles, Senate cycles, overlap with congressional cycles. So it's critical. It's critical. Rap the vote, get out and vote. Black votes matter should be just as fervent at the local level, if not more, than the federal government and the presidential level. Okay? So I believe that if we understood politics at its core, if we understood power at its core, if we understood finance at its core, if we understood separation of powers at its core, we would be much more proactive up to and through the presidential race in our local governments. We need to understand when bills come up to get voted on about construction in our counties, those big signs that they post that you ride by and ignore all the time, that has an impact on your voter rights. When they bring a prison upstate, that affects the population of that county. They take the prisoners out of the city and they send them to the county. So they're counted on the population rolls for the county. That's more federal dollars to fix the roads and to do construction there.
So Rob, our most important votes right now, in this upcoming election is where? Where should we be, putting all of our, not all of our eggs in one basket, but where should we be putting a lot of our energy into?
But absolutely the presidential race is critical, but you need to come down and learn your local race. Cliff said it, the sheriff, it's an elected position. If you don't like the way the police officers in your county, in your state, in your city, there's someone that's accountable to that. Governors, mayors, senators, congressmen, and there's dollars attached to those positions, okay? So these are lifetime appointments that our tax dollars pay for some of these positions. So we need to understand them. And when we watch the movies and see sometimes that we do go in and knock on the mayor or the governor or the sheriff's door, if enough people are making a movement and it's impacting his election, he will either get voted out or make some change. okay? And so I think at the local level, in addition to the presidential race, to answer your question, Doc, it's critical at both, but we have to learn them. The superintendents of our schools, most minorities will sit at the bar during happy hour and complain about how our teachers suck or their salaries suck or the voucher system suck, but superintendents are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and their contracts are multiple year contracts, 1, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, right? So hate to call her out, but in Baltimore, if I recall last year, there were kids in school cold with no heat, but she got her contract again for another 3 years, right? She's pushing $500,000 of income, but she can't keep the heat on in her schools. So we have to get down to the local level. We have to get down to the local level. It's critical.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and the chat is blowing up. I really think one of the great benefits of this tonight is not just, what we're saying, but all of the information you guys are talking about in the chat. I see my cousin Billy is throwing out some gems here. Billy, it's good to see you from New York. But yeah, it's just a lot of great information. So if you've not seen the chat box yet, take a look at it. But I want to just pause just for the next 15, 16 minutes and take just a few questions just from our audience. So Cliff and Rob, this can just be for either of you. I do think there's a few specific questions though in here, Cliff, that has Broward County's name on it. So you may want to answer that. This first question is, do you feel, and I'm going to put this to you, Cliff, and then Rob, you certainly jump in if you feel the need, feel that all the Miami Police Department genuinely understand and respect the cause. They met protesters on their knee. And so how do you feel about that? You unmute you, Cliff. Okay.
Do they understand it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure any police department understands it, right? I'm sure there's good ones and there's bad ones, right? I think if we're peaceful, even when we're peaceful, I even seen a cop in Fort Lauderdale get suspended today because a young lady was peacefully protesting on her knees and he pushed her down to the ground. And a cop that was responsible for that cop ran up to him, pushed him out the crowd, and they got him suspended immediately. I think if that happens more, we'll be in a better position right there, right? But those type of people that are abusing our people, they need to be called out. But they need to be called out by their gang members, right? They need to be called out by them because we don't see everything. They cover up everything for each other, and she held him accountable and he got suspended on the spot the same day. So do they understand? I don't think they understand fully. I think some of them are good, some of them are bad. My cousin is a cop personally. He's from the same community I'm from. He knows. His mother was a cop for 30 years. My aunt, she was the major of the police department of BSO. She understands. Because she's from the community that we're from, that we grew up in, all at the same time. Like I said, there's good and bad.
Rob, I know you have a lot of you, but using your education lens for a minute, I have not seen in probably some time when there's these types of riots, who's on the front lines, right? Usually when it's around race and if it's around Black people, you see Black people on the front line. And so my heart was glad to see that, on the front line of many of these cities, and I'm not just talking about Minneapolis, but Miami, from Chicago to Atlanta to DC and New York, on the front lines, you are seeing a melting pot of beautiful people, right? And my inbox is probably inundated with emails from colleagues and peers who are asking the question, and these are my white colleagues and my white peers, who are asking, what can I do to help, right? And they're genuinely asking, not just one of those, let me appease you because I know that you're hurting, but what can I do to help? Using your educator's lens, what can you share with the group tonight about ways in which we can help to share with our white counterparts and peers and family and loved ones on how they can help?
The first thing I would say is that historically, if you look back at all of the movements throughout our country, we have had support from other races. When you start using the word all in this country, and we rarely use that word in law, it's dangerous because you're including people and you're discriminating the exact same way that you're being discriminated upon. And regardless of what your religious or spiritual belief is about people, there are some people that are just not for injustice at all. I think what we need to do when we get that question and we have already filtered it and we understand that it's authentic, right? That person is someone that has been there with you through something before this, right? This is not the Becky or the Karen or the John that just is jumping up and wants to do the fad thing. I think we have to know how to help them utilize their resources to help the situation, right? Meaning we have to have done our homework. We have to know what doctors are researching policing. We have to know what doctors like you are teaching race relations at schools. We have to know where in our local community we can put their resources. For example, I just got a call today from a good local brother that said, hey, there's going to be some movement in Frederick, and some leaders are asking for some support from the African-American males that have influence in the community. And this came from a Black colleague and a white colleague that's on the education end. So I think we need to know the resources ourselves. We need to be able to help our white colleagues, number one, sympathize with us and say, thank you, your help makes me feel a lot better and supported. But also say to them, hey, do you know this sheriff stood for this type of policing and this other sheriff stood for this? Would you vote with me against this sheriff? Would you?
Well, let me make it more personal for you. So one of your teachers in your building, who's a classroom right beside you, your students go out on a lunch break and now you have 20 minutes to yourself in your classroom. And she asked you that question, what can I do to help? What would you say?
I would say, number one, educate our kids on the reality. Let's not hide from the issue. I would say, number two, make sure when you're not in front of my face that you have that same energy. Right? Don't wait for George Floyd to die in the street with a white officer's knee on his neck to come in my class and sympathize with me. Do you sympathize with that young Black man that comes in your class and doesn't have a pencil? So you have to challenge them outside of when it's cool to be a sympathizer. And then, unfortunately, you have to hold them to the fire, because at West Frederick Middle School, I was the only African-American male, unfortunately. In 2020 in Frederick County at a middle school, you have to consistently hold them to a standard. We can't let them slip. We can't let, because a new song is on and it's cool to act a particular way, we have to hold that standard of accountability for them. And we have to be honest with them about how they can help us and how we feel. We have to stop swallowing that offensive feeling we have at happy hour. Right? If something comes off hard at happy hour, we got to say, hey, man, look, that was offensive. And I'm your colleague, so I'm going to let you know this, but my brother might have punched you in your mouth. My frat brother might have slid you down the bar. One of my brothers might have pulled some steel on you, right? So I think we have to appreciate their support, help redirect them to where their energy could be most valuable for the overall movement, and hold them to a standard where we're constantly letting them know comments, actions, cool fads and things like that. No matter what you might see in a rap video, that don't roll with the majority of us.
That's good. There was a comment in the chat about the Black population can't correct it by themselves. This whole debacle started with white people years ago. And so it's going to take white people to play a large part in eliminating it. Very good point. Cliff, just talk for a minute, just really about, just respond to that was in the chat. I think that, hundreds of years ago, we've had this issue and we continue to have this issue. And so as a businessman in South Florida, are you intentional, even in your business practices, to bring in white folks, to assist them even in learning from a Black man who happens to be a CEO? Because, we've seen enough of African Americans working for, white counterparts, but we haven't seen too many spaces where white individuals are working for African Americans. So, have you employed, or do you plan to employ, and how well do you work with white people when it comes to, race relations?
Yeah, I didn't. Let me be careful. No, I try to. Me and my brother try to hire as many Black and brown people as possible. Our businesses in the underserved community to stop the spread of HIV and hepatitis C in the underserved community. So we have to be of that community to take care of that community, right? So yes, do we have some white business development guys or some white nurse practitioners and such? Yeah, here and there. But we do our part in taking care of our community.
So tell us, what has that experience been like for the African Americans that you've hired to work for an African American CEO? Who stands on his own 2 feet and makes his own schedule. You don't have to answer to anybody but God, right? How has that experience been for the African Americans that you've hired?
All of my executive team are African Americans, and all of them came on board because it was 2 brothers that ran the company. So they were excited to be a part of a company that 2 brothers ran, and it was a very successful company in a quote unquote white space, as in pharmaceuticals and healthcare, right? So they couldn't believe it. They didn't know how the hell we did it, but they was like, yo, I would love to come on board with you all and help you build something great.
Yeah, that's amazing. When I went back to get my PhD, my first thought was I want to go work at a HBCU. All of my schooling's at PWIs, West Virginia University, George Mason. I've gotten great degrees. I've gotten degrees paid for from white colleges, but I wanted the experience to work at a HBCU. When that didn't come to fruition and I landed a great job at American University, all of my students, 99.9% have been white in my classrooms, right? And so I took the opportunity then to teach them about race relations because they hadn't heard it. They were from homogenous backgrounds, many of them, almost perfect scores on the SATs. I think the college only accepted maybe 25% of the incoming class. And so to teach students, white students specifically, about race, I was floored to know that they were learning about race for the first time. That as 17, 18, and 19-year-olds, they were entering a diverse city, Washington, D.C., and they were learning about race and race relations for the very first time. I'm growing up in a very colorblind society, and I wonder if that's one of the pains that we have given our children today, is to make them think that they are colorblind, make them not see color. Ibram Kendi wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he talks about the importance of seeing color, because if you don't see color, then you don't see me. I know that I'm male, and I know that I'm 6 feet, and I know that I've got a athletic build, but if you don't see color, you don't see me. There's a lot of story that goes behind our race, so that makes a lot of sense. There was a comment here, and we've got about 5 or 6 minutes before tonight's first session comes to a close, but there was a comment about social media, and I want Cliff, you and Rob to tackle this. Social media has given way to any and everything to potentially go viral, right? Everything today is viral. If it happens in 5 minutes, you're going to see it. How do you think technology will change race relations today and in the coming years? How will technology change race relations today and in the coming years? Cliff, if you jump in on that, and then Rob, if you close us out.
Yeah, I just think it exposes it. It exposes it more. You see it every day on Instagram, I suppose, Facebook. You see some form of racism on there. So I think it exposes it, but it doesn't stop it, right? As you can see, those cops didn't give a damn that there was 30 people out there recording. They could care less that they were being recorded. They wish they would have paid attention to it now, but at that point in time, they didn't care. So it will expose. That's about it at this point in time. We don't know what it's going to do in the future, but expose is the word today.
Yeah, we didn't have like this growing up, right? Camera phones that could record things and you can post onto these social media platforms. Like we didn't have access to that. So, being exposed is one thing. Tell me, Rob, about just some of the things that, we have become privy to, things going virtual. Do you see that, Rob, as somebody creating a mandate or a policy to censor some of the things that are being posted online, almost as if you can't post this egregious act because we don't want society to feel as if racism still exists, right? Do you think that there will be a time where social media is censored to protect the powers that be?
So to get right to your question, the person that holds the most titled power in our country right now is already having an attack on media and social media because he wants to be able to skew the message. And to me, there is a lot of bad media out there. There's a lot of bad things on the internet. There's a lot of bad things in social media. You could learn how to make a bomb, but you also can learn how to do algebra. It's what you choose to learn. To get to the original question, I think that media and social media has already severely, positively and negatively impacted race relations. 400 years ago, when we were getting lynched or raped or maimed, there was no camera. Daddy wouldn't come home and mommy wouldn't know about it. She would tell her kids a story. She would move on. She would never marry again out of that respect to that man. And that man might have been burned, castrated, drugged behind a trailer, put on the railroad tracks. We would never know. The problem now, to me, is that even though the cameras are rolling, arrests aren't being made, prosecutions aren't occurring, jobs aren't being lost, pension funds aren't being damaged, police chiefs are not being fired, mayors, governors, senators, congressmen and women are not being held accountable.
Rob, I have a hard time swallowing that pill because it just doesn't make sense to me that, our president and then other officials can be online talking about the riots as opposed to talking about the men who killed George Floyd. We spent so much time on CNN, even watching the special last night, the 2-hour special. It was just so much talk and rhetoric around just the riots.
Bull. Okay. Right before we got on the call, Donald Trump talked about damage to the Civil War memorial, and he still has not said a word to this man's family. He has not lent any support to the leadership, even the political leadership in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He still has not made an attempt to try to calm our country. So accountability must go with the exposure. Cliff, when we get the video, just like the politicians, some of them in Minneapolis worked hard to act faster than many other cities have acted, but then you had the other half of the political system in the same town, in the same city, the same jurisdictions, colleagues, I bet they have had lunch together, try to tell a different narrative, right? So that dichotomy is what's going on in our country right now. You have political folks that are working very hard for justice and to uphold our Constitution and to do right by their constituents. Across the street, in a different building, across the hallway, they have a whole nother constituency that's trying to tell a different narrative. And we all see the same video, but we have to order another autopsy. We can't even get the doctor that works for the system there that are taking our tax dollars to tell us the truth, and then you use our tax dollars to turn around and police us. All of the National Guard movement going on this afternoon from our president, who's paying for that? Right? We're getting policed with our own tax dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more question I just want to kind of, jump into really quickly before we get off. Someone brought up some history. This is good. That the Civil Rights Bill was signed in 1964. And since this was signed, our government has not been held accountable, right, for the atrocities of discrimination, segregation, etc. Our government has still not honored the basics of the bill. And the question tonight from this post is, how is that possible? Rob, I mean, you've taken more law classes than I ever will. How is that possible that a bill that has been put into place, right, that the government and all the powers that be don't have to stand behind it?
They do, but we're not enforcing it. We're not holding the utmost highest ranking officials, from the Supreme Court justices to the president-elects, to the Congress and the House of Representatives, senators. We, as the people, we failed ourselves. In addition to our government and political system failing us, we've let them get away with it. Election year after election cycle, after public official election, we have not forced them to reconcile, number one, legally, and number two, financially. If we understand the power of the dollar and we say, if you support X, you're going to lose $50 million tomorrow.
Right.
Pepsi will dance a different tune. Disney sent out a tweet or a text or something saying that they stand with us. They've hired and employed Black artists and actors and actresses, and Disney doesn't really care about, they don't support this racism, and they want to move in a different direction. I have young children, so I turn on the TV. And do you know what the Disney characters, Mickey and Minnie Mouse, were talking about having that day? A picnic. We all understand the nature of the word picnic, but here Disney is at the exact same day telling us that they stand by the struggle of the African American because they have incorporated Black and brown princesses, which they have done, and I credit them. But do you think Disney is losing any stock dollars right now? But if we understand that Mickey and Minnie are still imprinting on our children the word picnic, and we all stop going to Disney World until the word picnic is eliminated from all Disney scripts throughout history, and any that you'll show on TV again, then Disney will get it. Then Disney will feel it. Until then, if we keep buying Disney stock and letting Minnie and Mickey say picnic, we are then the problem. So we have to hold people accountable, Doc. The people do. And it can come in the form of protest, but I think it comes with the money. The money moves, Cliff. And when people understand the dollar and they say, okay, we supported this teachers union, but you didn't do what we wanted with our test scores, we'll move our money to another candidate. It's that simple. But you got to get your money in the game, number one. And number two, you have to know how to move it. You don't like the district attorney? Exposing, vote, post something on social media. You don't like the governor, the mayor, go to their office. Find out when the budget appropriation meeting is. Go. If you don't like that schools are only getting $40 million, stand up and say it on the record. Like, we have to learn that system. But it's accountability. That's what I say, Doc.
Yeah, accountability in the process of learning. We're going to continue these conversations tomorrow. Those who are tuning in tonight, the lineup this week is we're going to have law enforcement on Tuesday. We're going to have some attorneys on Wednesday. On Thursday, we'll bring in some spiritual folks. And then on Friday, we're going to probably increase that session from 60 to 90 minutes. We're going to bring in some youth as well as some educators. The opportunity for students to talk about their experiences as well as educators on how this has impacted their lives. So please tune in these next couple of days. I just want to thank Rob, you and Cliff for coming on the line to set the foundation for all of these talks. We have been inundated with social media. I don't know about all of you on the call tonight, but I feel just drained, mentally, physically drained from all the things that are taking place. And then we have to get up in the morning, we have to log into work, and we have to work under the strains of this pressure that we carry, right? We've got to answer emails and Zoom calls and get on leadership meetings and lead meetings. And so our babies, our students who are in school, they're having to even jump online and finish school out and maybe be in a class with peers that just don't understand their pain. And so we just want to continue having these conversations the rest of the week. I will be sure to send an email out to everybody that was on the call tonight to invite you back. Please share with somebody like church, bring somebody. Tomorrow, we had as many as 75 people tonight, and I think that's phenomenal. Thank you those who sent it out to your networks. Thank you for turning off CNN for an hour. I think this was more engaging than watching, CNN tonight. But look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Again, bring somebody here. The email will go out tomorrow morning with all the speakers who are lined up. If you have a speaker that you think is going to do a phenomenal job, send them my way. Email me. You all received my email today with the link to log in. And so either drop it in the text, the chat box, or shoot me an email. It's been a pleasure tonight. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.